Today I'm going to share with you how I filmed and color graded my recent iPhone 14 video, Love, Fear, You. And I'm also going to break down a few extra things like what fonts I used for the titles, a little bit more about the music, as well as how I got that vintagey sounding voiceover that you hear in the film.
Create cool things.
Welcome back to the YouTube channel, friends. It's great to see you here. I'm talking about iPhone videography, color grading stuff today. You might also see some of my videos floating around on your algorithm that talk about fitness stuff and photography stuff. It's all me. And I truly believe that all of these things are interconnected. The healthier you are, the better you feel, the more creative you're going to be. So if you've been along for the ride with all these different things and you continue to support me, that freaking means the world, and you're pretty freaking awesome. Well, with that being said, let's get into this video, starting with how the heck did I even film this film all on my phone. This is how I filmed like 90% of this film. I grabbed my iPhone, opened up the camera app, hit record. Oh, that's a cool ocean wave. Oh, it's raining over there. Look at this little creek here. One of the biggest things you have to keep in mind here though is if you don't have any movement whatsoever in the frame, it's gonna look pretty boring. Additionally, before I filmed anything, I also knew I wanted some text overlay. So this is another reason why I didn't want a ton of movement in camera that might be a little bit too distracting for some of that text overlay. Now, in terms of formats, I did use cinematic mode when I was trying to create a sense of depth. For a lot of the wider shots that I got, I actually used the ProRes format, and I really wasn't looking to create a ton of depth with a lot of these shots. I was just wanting these hero looking shots that really just made the landscape look nice and dreamy and aesthetic. Also, whether it was cinematic mode or ProRes, I like to shoot these films in 30 frames per second and then drop that footage into a 23.976 frame rate sequence in Adobe Premiere, and then I'll slow that footage down to 80%, giving it a little bit smoother of a look. Does that all make sense? One of the first things I do when I import all of my footage into Premiere is convert it over to the Rec 2020 color space, as well as add my HDR conversion LUT. If you right click on this clip here, reveal in project, whatever iPhone clips that you have here, you can highlight all of them. You're going to want to right click that, hit modify, interpret footage, and then under input LUT, add that HDR conversion LUT and go to color space override. And we're going to go to the Rec 2020 color space, hit OK. And at this point, I haven't color graded anything here. I'm just making it look how it should when I filmed it. So before I go to color grade any image, what I'm going to do is pull from one of my presets that I've already created and just try a few out, see which one that I like the best. That's all linked in the description. If you are interested in getting those, definitely check them out. So with this clip here, the first thing I did was add the picnic preset from my Big Sur preset pack. Now, if we take a look here at my basic correction, we've actually cooled the temperature of this down, bumped up the exposure a little bit. There's no contrast on this image, and I've kept the highlights and shadows fairly close to where they were originally, bumped the whites and deepened the blacks a little bit here as well. Now, if I toggle off the basic correction here, you can see exactly what that's doing. Now, if we go over to the creative tab, you can see there's some warmth here that I've added in the shadows, and then also more warmth in the highlights. I've also bumped up the vibrance and saturation a little bit. Now, if I toggle on and off this creative section of Lumetri Color, you can see what these changes are doing to the color grade. Now let's go to curves here. I've also added more contrast here. If we take a look at the red tone curve, I've taken some of these reds and made them a little bit more magenta-ish. I've not done much with the green tone curve. And with the blue tone curve, I've just made some of these blue tones pop a little bit more. With hue versus saturation, I'm desaturating some of these greens here as well as some of the blues. I'm keeping the oranges pretty saturated because that's where I'm getting most of the color out of the sunset. On hue versus hue, I'm making these yellows a little bit more on the orange side of things, as well as these aquas more on the blue side, and then some of these blues a little bit more on the aqua. Now let's go and toggle on and off the curves here, and you can see how much a difference those curves make. Now keep in mind, after I added the Big Sur picnic preset, most of these adjustments had already been made. So I do go in and add additional tweaks, but probably 80% of the work has already been done just by adding the preset. The Big Sur preset pack comes with 5 different Lumetri presets, all of which can be adjusted in the Lumetri Color tab. And it's a lot lot different than just a LUT where you can apply it once and then maybe adjust the intensity of it, but this gives you way more control after you add the preset when I'm really trying to fine tune any given footage that I'm trying to color grade. Now the only other thing that I've done here to this clip is added a little bit of vignette. Just kind of darkens up the corners, which actually gives you a little bit more cinematic feel. If we click this on and off here, you can see exactly what that's doing. So that's the final color grade on this clip, but one extra step that I did here was actually add an adjustment layer to the sky. If we toggle it on here, it just brings out a lot more mood within the sky. Now to add this adjustment layer, pull up your project window, go to this little folded piece of paper, go to adjustment layer, hit OK, and then you just simply drag that over the clip in which you want that adjustment layer to be applied. I'm going to go and delete that one because obviously I already have the adjustment layer. Now the nice thing about this is with this adjustment layer on, you have the same types of controls under Lumetri Color. So with this adjustment layer, as you can see, I've really brought down the exposure here. I've brought down the highlights, the shadows. What you might be wondering is, well, Bryan, that's just being applied to the sky. How did you do that? Well, it's a simple mask here. So this is the clip without the mask, and obviously that's way too dark. So all I'm going to do is actually zoom this out, and then I'm just going to go over to opacity, click this free draw Bezier. I mean, just call it a freaking pen tool. I'm going to make a point here, point here, point here, point here, and then close it. And then we're going to want to feather this because if it's one hard line, the viewer will definitely notice that. Now let's go ahead and zoom this back in here. There you go. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind with these masks, if I was holding the phone like this, getting this sunset, but then I was panning down to, let's say, my feet, all of a sudden, by the time I get to my feet, it's going to be sand in my feet. So that mask is going to look really bad. So that's where you'd actually want to go in and make key points to actually automate that mask out so it just doesn't look, you know, freaking stupid. Does that make sense? But these adjustment layers are probably one of the main things I do to really make the footage feel even more cinematic because I'm emulating what appears to be more dynamic range. All right, let's move on to the next clip here. So just north of Cannon Beach is Ecola State Park, and you get this really cool viewpoint here. So let's jump over to basic correction, and I did use the picnic preset from my Big Sur preset pack. If you take a look here at the basic settings, I've taken the temperature and cooled it down. I've also darkened the exposure. I've actually reduced some of the contrast here, as well as bumped some highlights, bumped some shadows. And what I'm trying to do is preserve a lot of the detail that you're getting in these shadows. If I didn't bump these shadows and I didn't reduce the contrast, look at all of that I'm losing there in this foreground. Bumping the whites a little bit, dropping the blacks a little bit. And that's one thing I actually like to do. If I'm really bumping the shadows a lot, I'll bring the blacks down just to compensate for that so I don't get too faded of a look, because I still do want some aspect of contrast. If I just toggle these adjustments on and off, that's a huge difference right there. Now let's head over to the creative tab, and I've literally done nothing here. And now looking at the curves, it looks very similar to my last clip. I'm barely just bumping up the brighter parts of the image, deepening some of these mids and shadows here. Red tone curve, green tone curve, blue tone curve, all look generally the same as the last clip. So I really do keep a lot of these curve adjustments pretty minimal. Now taking a look at hue versus saturation, I've really reduced a ton of the warmth. These oranges and yellows, even greens. There's a big dip here, which is giving this image that coolness. If I turn this on and off, you can see exactly what just that one curve is doing there. From there, I'm just making the yellows a little bit more orange, those blues a little bit more aqua. So let's toggle that one on and off, and you can see quite a big difference there. And one of the main things I was trying to focus on here is just that bluish metallic tone and color of this image. Also, like the last clip, it did have some vignette on it. Now let's take a quick look at the adjustment layers that I've added here. So if we toggle this first one on, you can see what I'm doing with this one is lifting those shadows a little bit more in the foreground. I've simply bumped the exposure and bumped the shadows a little bit. So these adjustment layers come in really handy when you're just trying to brighten up or just one part of the clip that you're working with. Now let's toggle on this top mask here, and this is to just darken those clouds in the sky a little bit. I love it. Let's take a look at this clip here, and it's got some nice Oregon Moody greens. I started with the gray preset from my Big Sur preset pack. The temperature was cooled down quite a bit. I bumped the exposure up, dropped these highlights down, barely did much with the shadows, and then actually deepened the blacks just so it didn't look too faded. This is where I'll really use this slider to make sure that the fade and the black depthness feel cohesive. If I double click this, that's what my blacks look like without it, and that's just not nearly deep enough enough for me in context of all of the other clips. If we check these basic settings on and off, you can see what it's doing there. That temperature is really helping to keep things nice and cool. I like that a lot. On the creative tab here, I've just bumped a little bit of vibrance, a little bit of saturation, as well as some shadow and highlight tint. Just wanted to bring a little bit of warmth back here. And if we turn that on and off, it's very, very subtle what it's doing there. If we take a look at the curves here, that tone curve is looking very similar to my previous clips here. And I found that when I'm editing iPhone footage, I don't have to do a ton of major manipulation to these curves here. Now, on the contrary, I do mess with quite a bit of hue versus saturation. I've really desaturated the blues here, as well as a lot of these greens. This kind of desaturation here, while retaining just enough greens and yellows, is really where I get a lot of that moody green magic to come through. If we turn these curves on and off, you're going to see a massive difference there. There's just a few hue versus hue adjustments here, and there is a little bit of vignette on it. That's literally all I did with that clip, and I've got the moody greens. One of the things I experimented with in this film is actually color grading some of the footage in black and white and giving it more of a vintage aesthetic. But if we take a look at this clip here, I did go through my same color grading process. I added the Big Sur Picnic preset and even made some basic color adjustments here. Now, to make this clip black and white, I simply went up to basic corrections and just took the saturation all the way down. But I did actually reset the red, green, and blue tone curve. So if I move this blue tone curve up like this, you can see the coolness that it's giving to the image that, in my opinion, takes away from the black and white look of it. Then I actually also zoomed this clip out a little bit and cropped it so it was just fitting in the frame a little bit smaller. Just like the look of it. Let's take a quick look at some of the additional layers that I added here to give it that vintagey aesthetic. We add this first adjustment layer here. That's actually an adjustment layer specifically on the clip itself, and I'm just deepening some of these clouds. And then we can turn this on, and that's just simply a title layer. And then we also have this TV static noise. Now you're going to see it on the tops and bottoms here, but that's why I have this other adjustment layer. I went ahead and cropped that in. So this TV static noise, if we just look at it by itself here, this is what it looks like. Now, if I drag this static over a clip like this and set the blend mode to soft light and then take the opacity down to like 20-ish%, it's going to give you this look like you're watching this on a little TV screen. I like the way it looks. Additionally, we've got this film burn damage. This is what this looks like. Now, with that film burn over the clip, if I set the blend mode to screen, really reduce the opacity a little bit, you're going to get something that looks like this. Now, both the film burn as well as the TV static I actually got from Envato Elements. It's something I pay a monthly subscription to, but it's a great place for me to find resources like this and just drag it over and get a really cool look from it. Now, let's turn off all of these effects here, and this is what that clip looks like on its own. So I just went through a few clips here, but you can generally follow these same steps and get pretty similar results. And even if you don't want to get my presets, obviously I showed you what my Lumetri color looks like, so feel free to screenshot any of those and edit away to your heart's desire. So I actually do all of my titles in Photoshop, and this is generally what my titles look like. I usually like to have my canvas of my Photoshop project with like 7,000 pixels and then just your basic 4K height, just so I have plenty of room to type and this text is still going to be very crisp when it's actually in the film. But the two fonts that I used for this film, the main one was this Poppins font, and I did get that from Adobe Fonts. And then also I used this font here, which is Bookmania. So all I really do with my titles after I've picked out the font and I've got the weight as well as the letter spacing all exactly how I like it, I'm going to then type out what I have to say, and then I'm going to right click here and hit quick export as PNG. We can drag that text right on, and there you go. Go into this font here, resize it however I want to. These were also the same two fonts that I used for the main thumbnail. This Poppins font has quite a few options from thin all the way up to extra bold to black, so you can get a lot of different weights from these fonts. So obviously here I want people to mainly see love, fear you, and then I've got some smaller text that's not necessarily meant to be just obviously read, but it just adds to the aesthetic of it. And then obviously I'm using the iPhone font here. It's got a few different logos here. I actually pulled inspiration and wanted this to look like it was a movie poster. Last but definitely not least, let's talk about the music. I'm pretty freaking stoked about it, and that's probably because I wrote it and produced it, mixed it and mastered it myself using Logic Pro X or Logic Pro 10, however you say that. And I actually wrote this song before I even started editing any of the video. I had the song in mind, and I wanted that to kind of set the precedence for how I would edit the video. So as you can hear when you watch this film, the song really starts quite slow, and I knew that I was going to have some voiceover there and then have it go to more climactic parts and then drop off again. I'm super happy with how the song came out. It's titled My Younger Self, and if you actually want to use this song for one of your video projects, that song is available for you to use. Just go to moodsounddesign.com, start a free trial with us, and you can use that song as well as an ever-growing library of handcrafted, deliciously yummy music, all written and produced with you in mind. Additionally, there is a voiceover in this film, but one thing I wanted to do with this voiceover is not make it sound super polished like you hear my voice now, but give it that more like I'm talking on the phone, very vintage kind of feel to it. So what I actually did is took my wife's phone and called my phone and just left myself a voicemail with everything that I was going to say in the film. Then I took that voicemail and airdropped it onto my computer, put that audio into Logic, mixed it down a little bit, and then got it into Premiere to then put it at the right points in the video. I hope you got something out of this video. Definitely check out the link in the description. You can pick up those Big Sur presets. They're going to make your color grading workflow so much easier. Thanks again so much for watching. I really do appreciate the constant support. It freaking means the world. So with all that, I will see you on the next video, which is coming soon. Peace. Wow. So this is just an unedited, wow. Well, with all that being said, let's freaking get into this video. You've probably already skipped ahead, so at this point, I'm just probably talking to myself. But if you're still here, what's going on? How you doing? Dude, same. I'm freaking chilling, dude. Some random dude freaking on the phone with his grandma in the background of your film kind of kills the vibe. You know what I mean?